In oil and gas country, the family that kept the mineral rights built generational wealth. The family that didn't even know mineral rights existed got a one time payment while royalties flowed somewhere else for the next 30 years. Today, we make sure you're in the first family. This is Built to Own.
Welcome to the RE Real Estate Podcast, where we discuss buying and selling real estate in black and white. Here are your hosts, Ben Harang and Clint Galliano.
If you're considering buying any property that includes land in Louisiana, whether it's farmland, a camp, a large lot, rural property, anything beyond a typical subdivision lot, before you sign anything, ask the seller in writing, are the minerals included or reserved? Ask the title company to specifically trace mineral ownership in their work. Don't assume the standard title search will catch a 60-year-old mineral reservation. Ask them directly to look for it. If the answer concerns you, that's a conversation with a landman or an oil and gas attorney before you close.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the RE Real Estate Podcast. My name is Ben Harang, and with me today, as usual, is my co-host, Clint Galliano. How you doing today, Clint?
I'm doing wonderful, Ben. How are you doing?
Man, I'm doing terrific. We got a double header going on today. We recorded another podcast this morning, so it's podcast recording day, I guess.
Yeah, we touched on the episode. Actually, we're going to pull some excerpts from what we recorded this morning and add them into what we're recording today.
Mm-hmm.
But the episode in its entirety, we're going to release in a few weeks when we're done with our Built to Own series.
Yeah. So we're 4 weeks into our Built to Own series. Last week, we covered the 5 practical ways Louisiana civil law differs from common law, which is a discussion all its own. This week, we're going to take one specific stick from the bundle of sticks, the right to profit, and we go deep into mineral rights. Clint, you've been in oil and gas data and systems for nearly 3 decades. I'm going to follow your lead today, man.
Hey, happy to take it on. So first off, I'm going to start with a confession. When I first got into real estate, I assumed that mineral rights were a niche concern, thinking that it was mainly something for ranch owners in Texas or oil families in Oklahoma or, people over at the South Fork Ranch. I did know that there were some inherited family properties that had royalty interests in it, things like that, but I didn't realize that it was on a day-to-day basis that would be a topic that would come up on whether or not when you're buying or selling a piece of property that you would be concerned about the mineral rights. So in South Louisiana, it's a common thing. And a lot of times property gets sold while the seller retains the mineral rights. So today we're going to walk through what mineral rights actually are and how Louisiana handles them differently from everywhere else, and what the average listener needs to know before they ever buy or inherit land here.
All right. So mineral rights are part of the bundle of sticks we covered in episode 2, specifically a subset of the right to profit. In most American property transactions, this stick stays with the surface. In Louisiana, especially in oil and gas country, it often does not.
Today, we're going to cover 3 things: the difference between the surface estate and the mineral estate. And by estate, we're talking about surface rights and mineral rights. We're also going to cover the 10-year rule under the Louisiana Mineral Code that quietly returns prescribed minerals to the surface owner and when that comes into effect. And then the 3 main types of mineral interests: royalty, working interest, and overriding royalty.
Okay, so in this episode is especially relevant in any property transaction involving land, farmland, camps, large lots, family inheritances, and rural property of any kind. If you're buying or inheriting land in this region and you're not asking about minerals, you're potentially leaving generational wealth on the table.
If you remember back on episode 3, we covered prescription as one of Louisiana's 5 practical legal differences. The 10-year mineral rule is the most consequential application of liberative prescription in everyday Louisiana property life.
Okay, before we go any further, nothing in this episode is legal, tax, or financial advice. Mineral rights are highly fact specific, and the difference between two situations that look identical can be tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in the actual outcome. Every example in this episode is illustrative only. Before you act on anything you hear today, consult the Louisiana attorney who handles oil and gas, real estate, or successions. Consult a licensed landman for mineral title work. Consult a CPA for tax implications. We're here to put the framework in front of you. The application is yours and your professionals. Now that we have the legal stuff out the way, Clint, let's get rolling on it.
So you may be wondering, we mentioned the 2 estates, and I kind of gave a brief example of what they were. So what really is the difference? So under Louisiana law, property is split into 2 distinct estates. The surface estate, so that's everything you can see, build on, walk on, grow crops on, and the mineral estate. So that's everything that lies beneath the surface: oil, gas, sulfur, salt, and other valuable substances.
These estates can be owned by different people. When you buy land in Louisiana, you may receive both estates, or you may receive only the surface. Whether you get the minerals depends entirely on what the act of sale says and what the previous owners did with the mineral rights.
The most common way mineral rights get separated from the surface is a previous owner reserves the mineral rights when they sold the property. They sold the surface but kept the minerals. From that moment forward, the surface owner and the mineral owner are different parties, potentially forever, potentially across generations.
Why would anyone reserve mineral rights? In the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, when oil and gas activity was booming in South Louisiana, families who sold farmland or family property frequently reserved the mineral rights as a hedge against future production. Many of those reservations are still active today.
So, what can a mineral owner do? They can develop or lease the mineral rights. They can contract with an oil and gas operator or operators. Those are the oil and gas companies. They can collect royalties from production. Practically, this means an operator can come on the surface and drill, subject to surface use rules, even if the surface owner doesn't want them there. The surface owner gets the surface impact, the mineral owner gets the royalty checks.
Okay, this is the uncomfortable truth for surface owners who didn't know they were buying property without the minerals. It's also the source of the most preventable wealth loss in this region. The fix is upstream. Ask before you buy.
All right, I'm trying to see if we need to discuss this further. I don't think so. The blue stuff we don't need to talk about.
No.
We'll go into the 10-year rule and the 3 interests.
So you up.
All right, so next we're going to cover the 10-year rule and the 3 interests. So concept A, the 10-year rule. It's a mineral servitude prescription. When someone reserves the mineral rights separately from the surface in Louisiana, what they've created is technically a mineral servitude under the Louisiana Mineral Code, Title 31. A mineral servitude is subject to a 10-year prescription.
In plain English, if the mineral servitude is not used, meaning no production, no good faith drilling operations for 10 consecutive years, the servitude generally prescribes. The minerals revert back to the surface owner.
If there's any production, then that starts the clock over. So if a well is drilled and it produces, The 10-year clock resets and runs again from the date production stops. As long as production continues, the servitude continues indefinitely.
So why does this matter for surface owners? If you bought land where the minerals were reserved decades ago, but no production has occurred in the last 10 years, the minerals may have already reverted to you. You may already own them and not know it.
Why this matters for mineral owners. If you inherited mineral rights and you've let a decade pass without production, you may have lost them. The rules around what counts as production for prescription purposes are technical and worth a conversation with a landman.
So this is not a do-it-yourself analysis. The prescription clock can be complicated by partial production, suspended production, force majeure, and other factors. A landman or oil and gas attorney is the right person to actually run this analysis on a specific property.
All right, next, we've got concept B, royalty interest. So, in plain English, a royalty interest is the right to receive a share of the income from the oil and gas production without paying any of the costs of drilling or operating the well.
It's passive. The royalty owner doesn't make operational decisions, doesn't pay for the equipment, doesn't hire workers, doesn't handle the well. They just collect a percentage of the gross revenue when production happens.
Royalty interests are what most Louisiana mineral owners hold. When you hear about a family that gets a check from the well, this is almost always what they have. Typical royalty interests range from 12.5% to 25% of production, depending on the lease terms negotiated.
Concept C is a working interest. In plain English, a working interest is the right to actually develop the minerals, to drill, produce, and operate. With it comes the obligation to pay a proportional share of all the costs.
Working interests are what oil and gas operators themselves typically hold. A working interest owner makes operational decisions and is on the hook for development costs, but they get a larger share of the production after royalties are paid.
Working interests are not what most listeners will encounter. They're mentioned here for completeness, but the typical Louisiana family with mineral rights is dealing with royalty interest, not working interests.
And then just, I guess, you could say a popular note on working interests. If you've ever watched the TV show Landman, at the end of the second season, they're trading working interests on drilling the wells. And so that's what they're referring to. All right. Concept D, overriding royalty interests. Plain English. An overriding royalty interest is a royalty interest layered on top of an existing lease held by someone who isn't the original mineral owner.
As an example, a landman who put a deal together might be paid with a 1% overriding royalty. They didn't own the minerals. They don't pay the drilling costs. They get a small piece of the production for putting the lease together.
Why listeners need to know this term? When you read a mineral document and see ORRI or override, it's a layered royalty, not a mistake or a duplication. Now, in our conversation with the landman, this also may be so not just the landman might get an overriding interest, but a geologist may get the interest or other people involved in planning and executing the well, depending on from I know company I used to work for, they would do deals with oil and gas operators where they would get an overriding interest in some wells to develop fields for providing the services on the exploration and drilling of those jobs.
All right, Chris, if somebody owns a property and whether they bought it or inherited it, how do they go about determining what they actually own, whether or not they own the mineral rights?
So I believe from a real estate standpoint, typically you guys go back 30, 40, 50 years in tile. That's as far as you need to go back to confirm that you can warrant or you can confirm that the surface does in fact they do in fact on the surface and it goes to present. I typically wouldn't be concerned whether or not I own the minerals in Louisiana, honest and truthfully, until I got approached by an oil and gas company. Because just having the minerals, I don't know that you're really going to be able to do anything with it, right? You still need the oil and gas company to come in, have an interest, bring in the money that it's going to cost to drill for oil and gas. So, you know, if you just want to know if you own the minerals, you of course can contact the landman, ask them to do that. You can contact an attorney. It would be pricey because nowadays we can go online. We don't have to go to a courthouse. We can
Hmm.
get back to this patent date online for the most part. So it's a lot quicker than it used to be 10, 15, 20 years ago. The research that it takes to go in and make sure you own the minerals, you can do a quick version, as I said previously, whereby you just go back and see how long ago did we acquire this land. If it's been 10 years and, you know, and especially if your family has ever received any oil and gas money or revenue, then you obviously own it. To what percentage you own it in Louisiana, usually it gets back to 100% because of the prescription. That's the beauty of it.
If somebody's going to buy a house in a subdivision, in my mind, you're buying a house on a lot in a subdivision. Being concerned about minerals on that is significantly less important than if you're buying 100 acres or 1,000 acres
Absolutely.
of land. You probably want to know whether or not the minerals are being conveyed.
Right. I'll put it this way: if I was buying 100 acres, in that negotiation, we're determining if you're reserving the minerals or not, because that's 10 years of my life that I will not have the minerals, and then so that may factor into the price. Versus if buying a house in a subdivision, I mean, what, three, 2/3 of an acre, even an acre, it's just not enough to worry about it, and the difficulties of the oil and gas company you know, going into a subdivision, a big subdivision, because they're going to have to directionally drill. Nobody's somebody to tear down their house so we can drill an oil and gas well.
Hmm.
So you run into that, but I wouldn't be concerned with minerals for anything in a subdivision personally. I mean,
Okay.
you're going to get them out
Yeah,
here,
and
but it's not going to matter if we're being honest.
there's a couple of locations, or at least that I'm aware of, just because of my previous experience in the oil and gas industry, that you may want to be concerned about getting the mineral rights just because of the history of reservoir being below it. But 95% of the time, it's not really an issue just because there's no reservoir below the property and no one's coming to find oil or gas below the property.
Right. I think everybody can recall the Haynesville Shale, right? North Louisiana, and the spike and revenue it brought to the state of Louisiana was a great thing. Tons of wells were drilled. A lot of people have a misconception that if they haven't drilled in my area, it's because there's no oil and gas. Well, maybe it's the fact that it's not economic to go there and get that. It's there's better options for investors for their money than to go on something that has a low probability.
Okay. Let's talk about an example just to kind of pull it all together. We're going to take a hypothetical 40-acre tract in the Bayou region. Two families, same land, different stories.
All right. Family A bought the track in 1985. 1990, they sold the surface to Family B, but reserved the minerals or mineral rights. Standard reservation, recorded properly, mineral servitude created.
In 1995, oil and gas production began on the tract. Family A receives royalty payments, modest at first, maybe a few $100s a month, across 30 years of production, including a multi-year boom period. Those royalty payments add up to a meaningful piece of generational wealth. Conservative estimates and round numbers, $200,000 to $400,000, varying wildly by well productivity and gas prices over time.
Family B owns the surface. Family B receives the surface impact compensation when the well is drilled. It's a one-time payment for road access, pad construction, surface damages, modest amount. maybe $5,000 to $15,000, depending on the specifics. Then Family B watches Family A collect royalties for the next 3 decades, if they ever even know about it.
And the kicker is Family B didn't know about the reservation when they bought it in 1990. The act of sale referenced it, but the title work was done quickly, and nobody walked Family B through what the reservation actually meant. They assumed they were buying the land outright. They weren't. They were buying the surface only.
Now consider a variation. What if Family A reserved the minerals in 1990, but no production ever occurred? Under the 10-year rule, the mineral servitude would generally prescribe in 2000. The minerals would revert to Family B, who may still not know they own them today, 25 years later, simply because nobody told them the servitude prescribed.
The same land, the same dollars on paper, completely different awareness, different generational outcome. This is why next week we keep zooming in on specific sticks, water rights, then on-ramps to ownership, then the 5 engines of wealth.
Like every episode we've done recently, so the homework this week comes in 2 parts again, depending on your situation. First, if you're considering buying any property that includes land in Louisiana, whether it's farmland, a camp, a large lot, rural property, anything beyond a typical subdivision lot, before you sign anything, ask the seller in writing, are the minerals included or reserved? Ask the title company to specifically trace mineral ownership in their work. Don't assume the standard title search will catch a 60-year-old mineral reservation. Ask them directly to look for it. If the answer concerns you, that's a conversation with a landman or an oil and gas attorney before you close. Second, if you already own rural land in South Louisiana, or you're likely to inherit some, pull the existing title work. Look for any reservations of minerals, any references to mineral servitudes, any language about oil and gas at all. If you find a reservation that's decades old, the next question is whether production has occurred on or near that tract in the last 10 years. That's a landman conversation. There may be minerals that have been reverted to you and you don't know. In both cases, the answer is the same. The next step is a Louisiana landman or oil and gas attorney for a professional opinion on your specific facts. Not a national finance show, not a Google search, a licensed professional who handles Louisiana mineral title for a living.
All right. That was, it got deep, Clint. That's episode 4 of Built to Own. Next week, we'll look at water rights, the rules for owning property on a bayou, a navigable waterway, or any frontage that touches water. If you own waterfront property or want to, don't miss it.
And that's kind of the whole point of this Built to Own series is that we're doing, and I hate the term, but we're doing a deep dive on all of this stuff because it doesn't seem that there's a lot of discussion on this. So we want to bring it all to light. So if this episode put something in front of you that you hadn't thought of before, share it with at least one person in your family. Mineral rights are the kind of thing that gets handed down accidentally, not intentionally. And the easiest fix is for one person in the family to know to ask. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Go to realestatepodcast.com. You can listen to episodes right there on the website. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I think I said that already, and I'm saying it again. You could also, whatever your favorite podcast platform is, we've got links for you to subscribe there. We also have our YouTube channel that you can get to from there. So go ahead and subscribe so that next week's episode will land for you automatically.
All right. Everything's available on realestatepodcast.com, the audio and video versions of it. So I think that's it, Clint. We'll see you next week.
Another one in the can, Ben.
That is. Talk to you later.
All right. Thanks.
While we may discuss topics such as lending, interest rates, title law, real estate law, and appraisals in addition to real estate sales and transactions, please remember that we are only trained and licensed as real estate salespeople in Louisiana. The information shared on this podcast is for general purposes only and should not be taken as legal or financial advice. We may be agents, but unless we have signed paperwork stating otherwise, we are not your agents.